She didn't scream. Not when the officer grabbed her arm. Not when he yanked the robe from her shoulders like she'd stolen it. Not even when he leaned in, eyes burning, and said, "People like you don't belong in places like this." But silence isn't weakness, not hers. Because in that silence, she wasn't afraid. She was calculating. The marble walls, the echoes of footsteps, the smell of old books and fresh power. This wasn't just any courthouse. And she wasn't just any woman. Her name? Justice Celeste Monroe, the newest appointee to the highest court in the United States. And the man who touched her? He was about to become a national headline, not for his service, not for his honor, but for the day he mistook history for a threat. So if you think the system is fair, if you think racism looks like slurs and shadows, if you think justice always wears a robe and a gavel, stay with me. Because this story, it doesn't just show you the cracks, it exposes the foundation. And once you see it, you'll never look at silence the same way again. Before we go any further, tell me this in the comments. Have you ever been mistaken for less just because of how you look? Your story might be different, but your voice, it matters. And if you're here to uncover the truths they don't teach in textbooks, subscribe now, because stories like this, they deserve to be heard. It should have been a day of peace, a quiet tribute to the journey, the kind of morning where you breathe deep and let every step echo with memory. Justice Celeste Monroe had asked for no attention, no press, no podium, no parade. Just silence, because silence speaks louder when it's earned. She walked into the courthouse like it was a cathedral. Same marble floors she used to sweep past as a clerk. Same brass doorknobs that once felt out of reach. Now she held them like old friends. She wore a simple black robe, no jewelry, no makeup, no labels, just fabric and legacy. The kind of legacy that's not written in headlines, but carved into long nights of studying by candlelight, into cases won that were never supposed to be hers, into battles fought in rooms where she was the only one who looked like her. She moved slowly, fingertips brushing the walls like a pianist remembering the first keys she ever touched. She didn't need to speak, because every corridor whispered back, "You made it." And then, a voice, sharp, jarring, out of place in her sacred silence. "Hey, you lost?" Her heart didn't skip, but the moment did. She turned, a white man, security uniform, mid-50s, weathered. His nameplate read D. Rourke, but he didn't look curious. He looked annoyed, threatened even. She offered a warm smile, gentle, non-confrontational. "No, not at all. I used to work here." But he didn't soften. His eyes didn't meet hers. They traveled, judging not her face, but her robe, and beneath it, her skin. "You can't wear that," he barked. "That's for judges only." A pause. Just one breath. "I know," she said calmly. "I'm a justice." But those 3 words didn't land, not because they weren't true, but because to him they were impossible. His gaze narrowed, searching for the lie. He didn't see a Supreme Court justice. He saw what he wanted to see, what he expected to see. Just another black woman who, in his world, was out of place. And in that moment, frozen in fluorescent light and old stone, the weight of centuries pressed down again, as if her robe was too heavy with history, as if she still had to prove that she belonged. But this time, she wasn't the one who'd be tested. Can you imagine standing in a place you earned and still being treated like you don't belong? If that hit you, if it reminded you of something you've felt but never said, drop in the comments. Let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe. We're not just telling stories. We're rewriting who gets to be seen. There were no news cameras rolling, no flashing lights, but what happened in that hallway would burn itself into memory. It escalated in seconds. Officer Rourke didn't ask for ID, didn't call dispatch, didn't even pause. Instead, He lunged, like a predator who'd finally spotted something he thought didn't belong. His hand clamped down on her shoulder, fingers curling into the robe like it was contraband, and with one violent tug, he ripped it off her back, fabric tearing through the silence, gasps ripping through the air. "You people always play dress-up," he growled. The robe hit the floor like it didn't matter, like the cloth that draped Supreme Court justices was somehow less sacred when worn by her. A young clerk, frozen in shock, dropped her coffee. The cup shattered. A second clerk clutched her phone, trembling, unsure if she should record or call for help. And there stood Celeste, robeless, disrespected, but unbroken. She didn't flinch, didn't yell, didn't beg. She stood tall, shoulders square, chin high, like she'd been preparing for this moment her whole life. "I am Justice Celeste Monroe," she said, voice as clear as a verdict, "appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, sworn in just last week." Her words cut through the tension like a gavel slamming down, but Rourke didn't blink, because he wasn't hearing truth. He was seeing what his bias wanted to see, a black woman who didn't belong, an imposter in a place built by men who looked like him. And that's the danger, isn't it? When power is worn by someone you refuse to see as powerful, you convince yourself that you are the authority. But in that single act, that reckless, humiliating display, Rourke made one irreversible mistake. He forgot the golden rule of every badge, every courtroom, every law ever written. You never lay hands on power, especially when it's wrapped in dignity, standing in heels, carrying the weight of history, and the strength of every ancestor who never got the chance. At first, it was just a whisper. Software. Subtle. But in places built on protocol and reputation, a whisper can sound like a siren. From the bailiff near the elevators, to the clerk still shaking by the broken coffee cup, to the presiding judge down the hall who nearly dropped his gavel. That's Justice Monroe, the new Supreme Court appointee. 3 words, and the entire courthouse shifted. Doors creaked open, heads peeked out, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into shock. Inside the security office, Officer Rourke sat with arms crossed, still smug, still convinced he was in the right. Until the phone rang. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Call 1. Washington, D.C., the Chief of Security for the federal courts. Voice low, furious. "You put your hands on a sitting Supreme Court justice." Call 2. The Chief Justice himself. "Do you understand the constitutional crisis you've just caused?" Call 3. The White House, the President's press secretary. Short and sharp, "Contain this." Now. But it was already too late, because while Rourke was fumbling for excuses, the footage was already out. A grainy hallway camera, no sound, just a loop of injustice playing for the world, a woman standing still, a robe torn from her shoulders, her lips moving to say her name, his hand grabbing what was never his to touch. No need for commentary, no background music, just silence and rage. Within hours, the video was on every feed, every network, every phone screen in America. Not because it was sensational, but because it was real. And when truth is captured on camera, it doesn't need a narrator. It narrates itself. And that's when the country remembered. You can strip a robe, you can disrespect a title, but you can't erase justice, especially when it's wearing her name. Rourke was gone by noon, not reassigned, not under review, gone, suspended, indefinitely. The badge that once gave him power, now a paperweight on the chief's desk, and for the first time in a long time, a department didn't hide. They stood in front of microphones, hands folded, eyes down, broadcast live, coast to coast. It wasn't just an apology, it was a reckoning. But Justice Monroe? She didn't storm the podium, she didn't shout for resignations, she didn't say a single word, until the cameras caught her walking down the steps of that same courthouse. And when she did speak, she didn't speak as a victim. She spoke as a mirror. I didn't come here to make history today. I came to walk a familiar path. But sometimes the path reminds you that the work isn't done and that justice isn't just about courtrooms. It's about being seen. No tears, no tremble, just truth. The silence after her words said more than 1,000 protests, because in a world where so many scream just to be acknowledged, she was heard. By standing still. That 37-second clip? It circled the globe, not because she wept, but because she didn't. No theatrics, no rage. Just an unshakable woman, in heels, in history, reminding us that real justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and still shakes the world. This story was never just about one man's ignorance. It was about the system that taught him to see robes as costumes, unless worn by someone who looked like him. It was about every boardroom, courtroom, and backroom where talent walks in, and suspicion walks faster. Because Celeste Monroe's robe wasn't just fabric, it was armor, stitched with every rejection she turned into resolve, lined with the names of ancestors who couldn't even enter that building, pressed by nights of studying when others slept, weighted by history, yet worn with grace. And Rourke? He didn't just rip a robe. He revealed how shallow power becomes when it's fueled by fear. The irony is brutal. In trying to strip her of dignity, he stripped himself of authority. And that robe? It didn't fall. It rose, higher than he could ever reach, into the hands of a woman who didn't need to shout to be heard. Because justice, when it's real, echoes on its own. Now, millions know her name, not because she begged for attention, but because she stood tall when it was denied. So the next time someone asks, what does racism look like in 2025? Tell them, it looks like a robe being ripped off and still rising. It looks like silence mistaken for submission. It looks like the face of a woman who changed the narrative by refusing to disappear. And when they ask what justice looks like, tell them this. Tell them her. If this story made you feel something, don't let it end here. Subscribe. Share this. Be the echo. Because silence has never been justice, and we're not done telling the truth. Not even close.